Aside from MP, Mr. Murali is a lawyer. He went on the record with me about some hot-button political issues and legal issues, such as whether Section 377A, a British colonial-era ban on gay sex, should be repealed in Singapore. What is 377A, which is something I mentioned I would bring up as well. Considering your dual role as MP and lawyer, I'm sure you have a view on this issue that has been in the news lately. It's a matter of law, it's a matter of social mores, Section 377A that criminalizes sex between men, and whether it should be repealed. It's come up again because of India's decision to repeal it.
Yes.
Law Minister Shanmugam has commented on it, and he says it's a matter for Parliament. Where do you stand on it?
Okay, it's obviously a vexed issue. Now, I did understand that there is currently in Singapore a challenge in courts. Somebody filed an application in court challenging the constitutionality of Section 377A of the Penal Code. So what I can say in these circumstances, given that there are court proceedings, is a bit limited. But I can say this, ultimately, what should be the government's response to this issue? Perhaps that issue is something that should be understood better, in my personal view. Recognizing that at this point in time, you have a status quo where the government has said, and this was said from Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's time, that no two consenting adults would be prosecuted under Section 377A. If it's all they did was in their bedrooms, and you know what I mean. It's just consensual acts, private act,
and consensual.
Yeah, and consensual. That's right. So that's one. The other part of it is, really where the society stands on this matter. And we all recognize it's a polarizing issue. The sense is that a good majority, particularly those drawn from Muslim community, those drawn from the Christian community, have strong views about it. But there is a growing minority as well who feel that this provision should be abolished. So that's the present situation. And Singapore is not necessarily alone facing this issue alone. I mean, there's also a global situation, and we've seen what happened in India, what happened in China. So
but don't you think, to some extent, just as the government takes the lead on other issues, this too is something that the government can take a firm position on, instead of having a law on the books that it openly says it will never enforce?
Right, I hear you. Let me just say that we need to take a pragmatic position as well. Why I say this is because we cannot underplay the impact of such moves at this point in time when society is polarized. I'm not saying the issue is not important. It is obviously an important issue, but it has to be resolved in good time, and there are a number of issues that we need to look at the same point. I mentioned about the status quo, because if someone is being discriminated, for example, in the context of two consenting male adults, if they are being prosecuted for 377A, then a person's interest is involved. So we have the status quo at this point in time. The next point to note is in relation to the government's agenda. Ultimately, it is a crowded agenda. I mean, I spoke about what Minister Heng Swee Keat said about, making sure that we can deal with the next global financial crisis. I spoke about the national security issues. And really, to have a strong response to a national security issue, be it in form of terrorism and all that, we must have strong society, and we are talking about really the religious organizations working together. And I already mentioned that some of the religious communities have certain strong views about this matter. It has to be dealt with in the context of what is on the plate of the government at the present moment. I've also highlighted the status quo. And I also want to highlight one further thing. The Penal Code is an old code, and there were a number of other provisions which were removed over time. It was removed at a point in time when society kind of accepted it. For example, the provisions outlawing adultery. That was in the books, and it reflected one of the 10 commandments. There was a provision dealing with enticing a woman out of wedlock. That was in the books as well. And it was relevant at that particular point in time. But over time, at the right moment, they were taken out.
So that's really the point. Shouldn't we move with the times instead of hanging on to a law that the authorities openly say they will not even enforce?
Yeah. So it's a time continuum, right? So at the present moment, we must understand why a significant number of Singaporeans feel against the repeal, a significant number feels that they should have the repeal. And if you were to understand that, it's more than just the narrow issue of 377A. It's got to do with the status of marriage, status of family. And if the government were to go in and deal with it, it has to be a holistic dealing with all the issues. There is some sense in making sure when this issue is being dealt with by the government, is dealt with holistically, dealt with in a way where we can ensure the society can accept it.
So do you think now might be a good time to start dealing with it?
Oh, I think yes, there must be a study being done. I mean, the hallmark of democracy at the end of the day is that we must be able to justify to our residents about the moves we make.
You talk about it in the context of society and government and how the government should deal with it.
Yes.
But how do you personally feel about this issue?
All right. My overriding view and hope is that when this issue about Section 377A is settled with the broad support of the society, and there will be broad consensus on the moves that the government would make. Now, this may sound like wishful thinking on my part now, because the society is polarized. But I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic. It's because, well, there is general recognition by everyone that a homosexual is deserving of equal treatment, deserving of dignity and respect, and should not be treated as a social outcast.
Is that how you personally feel as well?
Yes, certainly. But on the other hand, I think both sides to the debate recognize that there is genuine belief that a repeal may affect important institutions of marriage, the institution of the family, which is, as you know, the building block of our society. So that is why I advocate a holistic study of all the issues, looking at the issues at depth, identifying it, talking and engaging the organizations involved, the civic societies, the religious organizations, and then an attempt should be made at reaching consensus on these issues. And not only that, we also have to look at developments outside Singapore, because Singapore is not alone. There are developments outside Singapore. We heard what happened in India. I think there's a 500-page judgment issued by the Supreme Court of India. And China there's developments there and other places, and I think we should learn from these developments too. This studies and all that should be undertaken now, but I guess there will be some time needed, for us to deal with all the relevant issues so that we deal with the matter holistically. But so be it. Eventually, hopefully, we will come to a position where society knows what the trade-offs are and what are the issues at stake, and why it is important to take, as much as possible, a united position on these issues.